today on the Health Collective podcast, we are joined by Annie-Emprima Martin, a former US veteran and mum. She has now turned to the world of quantum hypnosis to help people really understand their mind, body, soul connection and how to heal physical symptoms through essentially getting the conscious mind out of the way and using the subconscious to really eliminate certain stresses, traumas, and epigenetic inherited states in their body. Some of the points that really stood out to me from today's episode were talking about how we can inherit past emotional states from mother and grandmother. Essentially, 3 generations of women, or at least children, can feel the trauma experienced by past generational purely because of what we've inherited through the womb during our fetal stage. Another point that really stood out for me that Annie talked about was how what we think we know about what is developed in our physical state is not necessarily the whole picture. There's a whole philosophy of understanding the human experience and how if only we can use our subconscious to heal certain traits, we can actually start to reduce massive physical symptoms of fibromyalgia and other areas of chronic disease. So if you need any help in your body or your health, or you're suffering with fibromyalgia or any other health-related condition, and it's affecting your ability to love your body, to have energy, to lose weight, and to really just create a housing that you enjoy, then why don't you get in contact with us at The Health and Fitness Coach? You can head to our website, thehealthandfitnesscoach.com, or you can email us at rita@thehealthandfitnesscoach.co.uk, or check us out on our socials, all the details of which are in today's episode description. So have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Health Collective podcast. Really lovely to have you all here on what I hope is a very sunny day where you are. It is indeed where I am, and our guest who joins us all the way from Las Vegas, where it sounds swelteringly hot amongst the idyllic countryside around her. So today we are joined by Annie. Now, Annie-Emprima Martin is a mum, Army veteran, and metaphysician. And we're talking today on the subject of the story told by our mind, body, and soul, and how it's really up to us to listen to that story and use it for our own development. Her journey in understanding human energy started during her deployment to the Middle East in 2016 and has developed into essentially a full-time practice, helping people discover the layers of the reality, subconscious, and beyond what their eyes can see. And she helps people really heal from trauma and step deeper into their understanding and purpose. So first of all, Annie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So what I always like to do is get an understanding of what it really was that sparked the path that you're on, because obviously we said in the introduction that your journey in understanding human energy started during your deployment to the Middle East. Now, I understand the sentence, but I don't understand how that transition, came about. So it would be great if you could give us a bit of an insight into what happened at that time in 2016 that led to what you do now.
So I'll start with the first day we landed in Kuwait. I landed, and I had been to the Middle East before. I'm Lebanese, so I'd been to Lebanon, which is, it's Christian Islamic. And yet when I went to Kuwait, we're in uniform, and we landed in the winter. It was January 2nd, 2016. And I could feel this energy on my skin. And I thought, oh, this must be what it's like to be in a fully Muslim country. I didn't know what else to think, what else to make sense of it. And then I kept feeling these things happening around me. And I didn't know, because the mind needs to fill in the blank. So I'm thinking, oh, it's this. And then they would still continue. I thought, okay, I should be acclimated to that by now. Maybe it's the oil, burning in the oil, because we're at Camp Arif John and the sky is beige. Okay, maybe it's the oil I'm feeling, the burning oil. No, it turned out that my clair senses just turned on. And because that wasn't on my radar, I didn't know to acknowledge it. So I'm looking all around me trying to figure out why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. But then I started going into the chow hall, and the way the chow hall is designed is like a tuning fork. There's one way in, you get your food, and then you split. So you're coming up the tuning fork, and then you have to pick left side of the chow hall or the right side of the chow hall. And I kept feeling these hands moving me as if invisible hands around my shoulder. Go this way. And I'm having these conversations in my head as I'm walking down, talking to myself, like, why am I going down here? Where am I supposed to sit? And I just kept feeling the push. And then I would see a single soldier sitting, and I would sit with them awkwardly, like as if I had nowhere to sit. And I would sit down, and I'm still having these conversations, and that just started propelling and intensifying, and you can't tell the chaplain that you're hearing voices. You can't tell mental health that you're hearing voices, because they're going to send you out of the deployment. So I'm having this experience in my head, and no one around me knew to even empathize with what was happening. But these voices would say, like, make sure that this person, go have dinner with that person, go have dinner with that person. And I would be the annoying person that kept calling that individual, you're going to have lunch with us, you're going to have dinner with us, because the voice kept saying, don't leave them alone. It wasn't don't leave them alone, it was go eat with them. It was an action on my end to engage with these different soldiers that I was with. And I didn't really know the impact of that until I came back from the deployment. And I was walking through a restaurant, and one of the soldiers got up and just bear hugged me. And he was probably more than about 20 years younger than me, and just bear hugged me in front of his girlfriend and his parents. And that was one of the moments when I realized there was something that was happening, and I wasn't consciously aware of it. So I leave the deployment, and those moments kept increasing, and which led to me experiencing things I had never experienced before. Like when my friend passed away, 2019, a few years later, she was my big cheerleader here in Las Vegas. Those experiences continued in the sense that we're planning her funeral, and with her husband and her daughters, and I'm hearing her say, don't pick those flowers. The white ones are going to wilt. I want these. I want the lavender dress. And about 6 weeks after her passing, I had what I thought was cardiac arrest. And my whole body was aching, my neck, my chest, my back, kept going to the ER. The first time they looked at me, they did a urine sample, like, you have an UTI. I'm saying, this is not UTI. And they sent me home with 12 ibuprofen. And I'm still in this extreme, immense pain that I can't rest. I can't be comfortable. Next morning, I go to the ER again. They did an MRI, and they found sinusitis. That's what it is. And they sent me home. Not what it is. I'm feeling it here. And the doctors kept saying, yes, that's what it is. Then the third time I went, they found nothing. And the fourth time, it took 4 times going to the ER in 5 days for someone to sit down and say, what is going on in your world? And I'm like, I went through a very difficult deployment. I came back with visible and invisible injuries. I had surgery. I asked for a divorce. My ex-husband was spiteful from the day I asked for the divorce. My life got crazy. My friend died. She's like, okay. It doesn't say anything to me. But then as I'm with the VA, the Veterans Affairs Hospital, they're starting to pay more attention to my mental health and diagnosed me with having fibromyalgia. And again, that voice that I had in the deployment came back and said, this is for you to experience, but not for you to keep. As I processed what that meant, I could feel that I was embarking on this journey to understand the impact of emotions, like how to have these major life events back to back to back of grief and grief and grief and grief in its complex forms. But even in that moment, when I heard that voice say that, I still didn't understand what that meant. So there's that author, Dolores Cannon. I had her book on my desk a moment ago. Dolores Cannon, she's quantum healing hypnosis technique. It's more on the fringe side. It's very metaphysical.
Yeah.
And I had read some of her books, so I was familiar with what the subconscious is capable of doing when our mind steps aside and gets out of our way to help our body heal. And I felt this pulling to learn her program. And I'm again having these conversations in my head of, I can't afford that right now. I'll negotiate with you, because negotiating with your inner self is always, it always works out. So I will participate in this training, but I will not pay that price. So I kid you not, 3 days later, it went on sale for 4th of July weekend. Touche. And I did the training, and you have to do 50 people. You have to spend about 4 hours per person, 50 people to get this certification. And at the time, I even heard when I was training for that, this is for you to understand. This is not for you to keep. So as I would speak to the subconscious, to the soul, to the spirit, however our belief systems include that, as I was doing that, I was seeing these patterns between physical ailments and emotional well-being and childhood traumas. And that catalog now has expanded over many years for me to look at other people that have fibromyalgia and ask them, what kinds of grief have been in your life? Was it unmet needs of your parents during childhood? Was it the loss of a marriage or a loved one? What's the list of complex grief in your life? And let's start moving through those. And the people with fibromyalgia, it was like reverse contractions. There were fewer episodes and fewer episodes until they were no longer having episodes of fibromyalgia. And I'm a doctor of metaphysics. I'm not a doctor of I'm not a doctor of psychology or a doctor of medicine. So my interest is in the human experience, the philosophy of the human experience, which I didn't have the doctorate at the time all of this is starting, but that's where we are now. And my path is really about, it's about understanding the invisible stuff that we're not measuring. Just like the hands that were pushing me in the chow hall. I didn't have to understand it at the moment, but it had a really big impact on this journey.
So it's interesting what you say, and I am in complete agreement that the emotional well-being of an individual often has a huge impact on the physical well-being. It's very hard for anybody to disconnect the mind, body, soul from each other because they are one and the same. They are a triad that have equal and opposite reactions within each other. But from what you're saying, do you believe that fibromyalgia, alongside many other illnesses, diseases, chronic struggles in terms of physical health, are you saying that you have a belief that they're all manifested because of the mental and emotional and spirit state, or would you agree that there's equally going to be certain physiological and maybe inherited or biological factors that take over regardless of whether someone's had trauma or not?
Sure. Nothing's 100%. And even our genetic predispositions, we're just now breaking through these realizations through epigenetic studies, through neuroscience, that we may be carrying the baggage of our ancestors. So here's a very simple, oversimplified example, is that if our grandmother was in emotional distress at the time she's pregnant with our mother, and our mother is absorbing that vibration of anxiety without the experience of the anxiety, moms develop the eggs to fertilize us while she's still a fetus. So you have 3 generations experiencing anxiety, but 2 of them don't have any understanding of the experience that created the anxiety, lack of safety or whatever it may be. So as we're studying epigenetics, we're also realizing that the Native Americans and the indigenous people around the world that would act as if their actions would impact their children's 7 generations down. We're now starting to come back to those ancient ways and understand why they were believing that. That if and we also have learned behavior. If our parents' coping mechanism was alcohol, or our parents' coping mechanism was to binge eat, we tend to mimic those coping mechanisms. which then mimics the same symptoms within us of autoimmune diseases and disorders. So is it 100% emotional? No, of course not. But definitely more than what our culture has paid attention to. We have a lot more happening, which is where in my lane, I pick up where those other two categories leave off. I have that third piece of that pie.
So in that third piece of the pie, there's a few words that you've used, which probably we might want to take a second to maybe expand on.
Yeah.
So what I'm picking up on here is Doctor of Metaphysics. So physics is probably a subject that most people are familiar with, whether it's through school or continuation in the science of physics.
Hard science.
So metaphysics, as well as quantum healing hypnosis. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Could you expand on what those two terminologies mean?
Yes, metaphysics is a philosophy. It's a branch of philosophy. So if you go to, and I'm going to use the United States terms. So if you were at Harvard or Oxford or wherever in the world, metaphysics is a philosophy. It's one of the pillars of philosophy that we have, and it really focuses on why are we here. It's the understanding of the existence of our experiences. Why are we here? What are we here to do? What happens after? What happens in the afterlife? So it's the philosophy of the human experience, or the why of our being. And with quantum healing hypnosis technique, that was what Dolores Cannon called it. She was a hypnosis at the time, and she was hypnotizing people and having these very weird outcomes. And that also evolved into some very deep transcriptions, which, if you notice, there's a lot of books behind me. She was communicating with the subconscious in such a deep way that people were healing during her hypnotic sessions, hypnosis sessions. And is that my modality? It's not, but that was the diving board for me into this pool that I play in. So what I've learned through my journey is we have our physical body, the hardware, and I refer to people as human computer systems because the way that I scan and I see people, I'm not always seeing organs. Sometimes I'm seeing other things, which it's not a super mainstream approach. So I'll simplify it. The hardware is the physical body. The operating system is the consciousness, the mind. And then we have our soul or our spirit or whatever our belief system uses. And they're layers. What I've done with people to heal trauma is take them up into a higher expansive state, raise their vibration, so to speak, which to a new audience, it doesn't mean much until you experience it. There's no way to really say this is what this is. It's something you have to walk through. You can't see a picture of it. The quantum world is the world within our consciousness that takes the highway, like we would travel down the same highway as imagination. Can you see? It'd be like me saying, can you imagine a blue ball and a yellow bird? And if you can do that, we can go into a conscious state, much like meditation, but a higher vibration, and explore the world within our brain. We're sort of accessing the archival part of our brain, the filing cabinets. And in those filing cabinets, this is sort of archive headquarters, is the brainstem of old stuff. But then, each of the vertebrae in our spine is also a filing cabinet. So what we're doing is going into this conscious quantum space and seeing things that our physical eyes can't see, but that doesn't make it less real. It just makes it less tangible. And we can pull forward the emotions that our body is holding on to, the hardware, to help the operating system release it.
Right. So this, it's probably, as you said, for someone who hasn't experienced it, it's probably quite a challenge for them to understand what that experience looks like. So for everybody's sort of understanding, because I understand what you mean when you say vibration or frequency, right? but a lot of people won't
wouldn't.
understand what that means. Is there a way that you could maybe explain the different vibrations or frequencies that we work on, and how those can shift depending on our state?
To experience who we are, we have to be in our body, right? So culturally, things happen, we dissociate even a little bit, like we go numb, or we don't feel like we're in our body, or we'll use different language, whatever, like I feel disconnected, I feel like I'm not myself, whatever that language is. It's the essence of who we are. The power cord got unplugged. We have to be in our body. All the attributes, mind, body, spirit, have to be home. So if we're in a very difficult situation, we're probably not home, like inside our home being our body. That would be our first step, is making sure that we're home.
Interesting. Well, that was a fascinating little journey there, and really curious to see an insight into how you do what you do. And it's been really fascinating talking to you today about an area that's probably quite foreign, quite alien to most people. Most of us will have an understanding of the mind-body connection, but not to the level that you took us to. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. It's been brilliant to have everyone listening today. And as always, if you need to get in contact with Annie, or you want any of her details, they will be in the podcast description. So please do have a look and go and check out some quantum level hypnosis and see how it could work for you. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And again, thank you, Annie, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.